am considering the fact I am in a somewhat precarious position. Indeed, if I am ever arrested again by Wiltshire police, it is possible that they may kill me in police custody. So it's interesting to consider this realization that I've basically probably gone too far in terms of my exposures to Wiltshire police to turn back, and indeed I have to avoid getting arrested at all costs. Indeed, these videos are beginning to cause me problems because I'm finding it rather stressful and a strain on my mental health to continue to make these videos. However, I'm going to continue, and I'm going to aim for at least a 20-minute memo once a day. So it's all very interesting to consider indeed. Returning to the Schizophrenic Super-Spy story, indeed, I was incorporated into the Project ANISEED experiment, having undergone Project Shatter in 2012 at Grenville Lodge. And indeed, the idea was that I'd been designated as having some sort of schizotropy by neuroscientists connected to the Grenville Lodge Masonic Institution, and therefore could be utilized in experimentation by the British intelligence services, namely MI6, i.e. the British Secret Intelligence Service, who were running the operations at Grenville Lodge. Indeed, it's interesting to consider this, that MI6 were overseeing the operations of the Freemasons at Grenville Lodge. And therefore, it was MI6 neuroscientists who designated me as possessing some form of schizotropy, and therefore incorporated me into the Project ANISEED program, which is itself a branch of the wider MI6 mind control programming known as the Mindgate program, which is the British equivalent of the US CIA MK Ultra program. So it's all very interesting to consider the fact that Mindgate is a parallel program to the more known MK Ultra program in the United States. And indeed, MK Ultra never ended, just as the Mindgate program has never ended. Indeed, the Mindgate program has been operative since 1947, and indeed, Project ANISEED began around the same time, and at the same time as the beginnings of the Roundway experiment, also 1947. So it's all very interesting to say that 1947 seems to have been a pivotal year in intelligence machinations, especially considering this was just before the beginning of Cold War hostilities. So it's all very interesting to consider that the British intelligence services had already uncovered evidence that the Soviets were involved in mind control programming and had been since the beginning of the communist era. Indeed, the Soviets already had an enormous mind control labyrinth operating in the Soviet Union, and had done since the ushering in of the communist era. And Lenin's conferences with Pavlov regarding mind controlling an entire nation, as was Lenin's idea. Indeed, this was put into effect via utilization of various strategic laboratory settings, whereby the chosen test subjects were mainly paranoid schizophrenics, and the Soviet psychiatrists were utilizing various obscene mechanisms of programming. And indeed, by 1947, the Soviets had also begun to experiment on prisoners in their gulags. So it's all very interesting to note, indeed, this really began in the 1930s during the Stalinist regime. And the British intelligence services by 1947 were beginning to become afraid of the possibility of Russian programmed schizophrenic ghosts operating in the United Kingdom, and a theory that was later dubbed the Manchurian Candidate, i.e. hypno-programmed assassins, as the Soviets were utilizing hypno-programmed assassins. In the United Kingdom, indeed, there were a few murders in 1946 and 1947 which have been put down to Soviet programmed mind-controlled assassins in the United Kingdom. The details of these, however, are a little sketchy, so I'll have to go into these at a later date. Indeed, it's all very interesting to consider that the British intelligence services began to experiment on paranoid schizophrenics via Project ANISEED after they had begun to fear the Soviet mind control experimentation and what that could possibly mean for the future Cold War. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed. One may believe that the British intelligence Project ANISEED mind control programming was itself less brutal than the Soviets' attempt to create hypno-programmed spies, couriers, operatives, agents, and assassins. However, the British techniques were no less terrible on the fractured mind of the paranoid schizophrenic. Indeed, paranoid schizophrenics have been through rather a lot because of the programming mechanisms of the British intelligence services, and indeed, the Roundway Asylum experiment was notoriously brutal, especially considering the wardens at Roundway were themselves recruited from the town of Devizes, where there is a strain of hatred for mental patients. So it's interesting to consider all of this when analysing all of these currents. Indeed, it's all very strange to consider the fact that the British intelligence services have been experimenting on paranoid schizophrenics very heavily since 1947. Indeed, this was not a new phenomenon. Indeed, the Society for Psychical Research began experimenting with paranoid schizophrenics regarding paranormal phenomenon as early as 1874. So it's all very interesting to note that the real Mindgate program began in the United Kingdom in 1874. And even before that, there was a lot of experimentation on paranoid schizophrenics, especially since 1776. So indeed, the term paranoid schizophrenic did not actually come into use until 1907 when Eugen Bleuler coined it. And indeed, before that, paranoid schizophrenia was known as dementia praecox for 25 years. Indeed, before that, paranoid schizophrenia was simply known as lunacy or mania. So it's all very interesting to consider that lunatics have been chiefly targeted, in a sense, by the intelligence services of the United Kingdom. A lot of this has to do with the cosmic conflict going on between paranoid schizophrenics and Freemasons. As I've noted before, the majority of high-ranking British intelligence operatives are themselves high-ranking Royal Arch Freemasons. So this crossover means a lot when you attempt to understand why the British intelligence services have put so much focus and effort in tormenting, harassing, persecuting, and programming paranoid schizophrenic individuals. So it's all very interesting to note that there is a cosmic conflict going on between paranoid schizophrenics and Freemasons, and this has basically become a conflict between paranoid schizophrenics and the intelligence services. So it's all very interesting to note indeed. Sorry. My time in the Roundway experiment was really quite a horrible time in my life. Indeed, in 2015, I'd begun to realize that something had occurred to me at Grenville Lodge, and I was beginning to piece together flimsy pieces of my memory because Grenville Lodge had semi-lobotomized me, basically caused me to become a severe amnesia case. So it's very interesting to consider that I was walking around Eastern Europe and Russia with severe amnesia and ended up in some very strange situations indeed. I am always going to be influenced by the Russian mental patients I encountered during my time in a psychiatric facility in Voronezh in 2013. Indeed, this scares the British populace because the current Cold War hive mind means that these Anglo villagers are all scared of anything remotely Russian. Indeed, I'm considered by these rural Anglo villagers to have Russian vibes, so it's very interesting to note this is due to the influence upon me by Russian mental patients, both real and literary. So it's all very interesting to consider, and indeed, as I stated before, in the Roundway experiment, there are large numbers of individuals who are Russian mental patients kept in the catacombs underneath the visors, especially beneath the Roundway Asylum facility, i.e. the current site of the Green Lane Psychiatric Facility. There are catacombs beneath there where Russian mental patients are kept and tortured and programmed as part of the Roundway experiment. Some are released to become schizophrenic ghosts or schizophrenic super-spies, but the majority are slaughtered by the butchers of Walter Rose and Sons Butcher Shop. Their meat is sold as pork in Walter Rose and Sons Butcher Shop, and their organs are harvested and then distributed on the dark web. So it's all very awful. And indeed, as I was stating about my own experiences with the Roundway experiment, in the spring of 2015, I was beginning to work out that something had happened to me at Grenville Lodge over 2 years before. And indeed, I was then lobotomized again at a black site somewhere in Wiltshire, having been snatched off the streets by MI6 operatives coordinated by Stanley Graham. Indeed, a lot of the activities that I've undergone do seem to have some sort of connection to the Graham family. Indeed, Anthony Graham is a chief defense intelligence spook operating out of almost a military base, and indeed he basically wishes to lobotomize me again. So it's all very interesting. At some point soon I may lose my memory of who I am and what I have achieved. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, this would probably coincide with the scrubbing in totality of all of this information released on this channel from the internet. So it's all very interesting to consider what could happen in the coming weeks and months. Yeah, as I stated in the Roundway experiment, I was designated TF-84 and inculcated with Nazi fetishist ideology. And indeed, I became basically a Gladio 4 program schizophrenic super spy operating for the Nazis within British intelligence. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, a lot of my major mind control programming was done at the time by Dr. Leonard Johnson, who was an operative of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and therefore a Nazi cultist. Indeed, he programmed me with Nazi fetishist ideology. And once the hypno-programming takes effect, the behavior of the targeted paranoid schizophrenic can change. Indeed, I underwent a severe behavior modification process in the spring of 2015. Therefore, basically became an automaton for the Nazi networks within the British intelligence services, which was all rather horrible. And indeed, I regret my part in this quite considerably. However, I've realized now that I was not a consenting Nazi at all. So it's all very interesting to consider this was all part of the Roundway experiment, wherein I was designated TF-84 and mind control programmed to spout Nazi fetishist ideology in the streets and on the internet. So it's all very interesting to consider and all really quite awful. indeed, these Nazi networks are overwhelming majorities within certain cells of British intelligence, especially factions that were connected to Sir John Scarlett, i.e. the Eggman, who was the Director General of MI6 during the first decade of the 2000s. Indeed, Sir John Scarlett serves long-range operations of the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. So it's interesting to note that Dr. Leonard Johnson was a close acolyte of Sir John Scarlett. So it's interesting to see that Dr. Leonard Johnson is a chief mind control programmer for the British intelligence services, an MI6 operative who programmed schizophrenic super-spies to operate within the Gladio 4 trajectory. So it's interesting to consider I was programmed to operate within the Gladio 4 trajectory as a schizophrenic super-spy for the Nazi networks within British intelligence. And indeed, these networks do seem to have rather a lot of power and influence within the British intelligence structure. Indeed, all of these operatives, Sir John Scarlett and Dr. Leonard Johnson, are themselves high-ranking Royal Arch Freemasons. So it's interesting to see that they have eugenicist ideologies and believe paranoid schizophrenics are the scum of the earth, basically. So it's all very awful. Indeed, this overarching Royal Arch Masonic agenda involves the lobotomization of many paranoid schizophrenic super spies. So there are a lot of severe amnesia cases among those who have undergone the Project ANISEED mind control programming. So it's interesting to consider. Also, at the moment in Russia, there are a lot of people walking around with severe amnesia due to mind control programming as part of Project Sturm, which is ongoing, which is a KGB mind control programming agenda and continues to this day. So it's all very awful. Indeed, Lee Harvey Oswald was himself a hypno-programmed neurotic. He was programmed by both the CIA and the KGB. So at the time of the assassination of JFK, it is unclear who Lee Harvey Oswald was actually operating for, because there were so many cells of different intelligence networks of different nations utilizing the codes of his programming. And indeed, he didn't actually fire the shots that killed JFK. He was just a deception. So it's all very interesting to note. However, he did commit several hypno-programmed assassinations of witnesses to Masonic and KGB cell activity over the years. So it's interesting to consider. He also had several body doubles in the Soviet Union and in the United States. So it's interesting to consider. This is the amount of effort that the intelligence services are prepared to go to utilize one individual in their aims, just as the amount of effort that the intelligence services have put into my ongoing test subject status. So it's interesting to consider I am a terminal test subject in a terminal experiment, i.e. a mind control experiment. Indeed, I've technically escaped from several mind control experiments over the years, both British and Russian. So now I'm in a rather precarious situation, because anyone from the British intelligence services or the Russian intelligence services could pick me up and reprogram me at some point. So it's all very interesting to consider. Therefore, I need to pump the public domain full of as much information as I can before I am reprogrammed, either as a schizophrenic super spy to operate for some cell's agenda, or as a schizophrenic ghost, whereby I will most probably be programmed to kill a policeman with a kitchen utensil, which will then be blamed on a Russian plot, and new Cold War hostilities can start. So it's all very interesting to consider that I am caught up in a large web of espionage. So it's all very strange and really quite disconcerting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there now.